Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Steve Down. This is my guitar. We are in the third part of a series looking at Jim Hall's version of All the Things You Are. If you're just joining us, then I would suggest you go back and look at the first two episodes. Episode 1 looks at the head. Episode 2 looks at the first chorus of his solo, which is an amazing lesson in how to phrase and use melody creatively in your solo. This week is all about chords, so we're going to be looking at how to solo with chords and the various different ways that Jim uses chords in his solo and some of the really intricate harmonic devices that he uses to make that stuff sound interesting. There's some basic chord melody soloing going on, and then there's also some really advanced stuff in there as well. So it's actually really good for guitarists of all levels to take a look at. Remember that you can slow it down on YouTube if you're struggling to keep up with the speed of it. Before we get started with the lesson, just going to say a massive thank you as usual to my my patrons, all of the ones that have stayed with me. We just hit 60 literally 2 minutes before I started recording this video. So Laura, you are number 60. I'm going to read out the other names though. So thanks to Bob, Anthony, Swilly, Paul, C. Malander. I don't know your first name, but thanks. And then yeah, Laura, who joined 2 minutes ago. If you want to support me on Patreon, the address is here. And on there, when you sign up, you'll get the full transcription of the solo, the backing track that I created with Jamie Sefton and Joe Harris, especially for this series, and then all of the exercise packs from this series and for every other series that I've done on this channel as well. If you want to do more of a one-off thanks for the lesson, but don't want to go any further than that, then there's a link to buy me a coffee below, which is a good way of doing that. And then if you haven't got any financial capacity to be able to support on here, but you really want to show some support to me, then just hit the subscribe button, the like button, and share it with your friends as well. So let's crack on. Let's take a look at the first 8 bars of the second chorus of his solo. Here we go. So the harmonic content of this is fairly similar to how Jim approached it last time. So if you want to understand what's going on underneath, then take a look at the last video because that unpacks the harmony. The thing that Jim is doing here that is really unique is he's using what's called a pedal tone. And a pedal tone is basically a tone or a note that continues across for many bars. So whilst the harmony changes, there's a note that is pedaling going across. Sometimes it's known as a drone as well. I'm going to call it a pedal tone here. So basically what he's doing here is he's using a pedal tone, which for him is the note of B flat. Now this note B flat is probably not one of the most obvious choices of note to use over the top of this progression, this 8-bar progression, because it only features heavily as a chord tone in 2 of the chords, B flat minor 7 and E flat 7. For the rest of the time, it's going to be an extension of some kind. So yeah, it's interesting that he uses that, but if we remember from the last chorus, he used B flat as something of a feature note as well. So it's pretty cool that he's doing that because it's creating something that sounds a little bit different than maybe other guitarists might have approached it, who might be more chord tone focused. So yeah, B flat is the pedal tone that he's using. And then underneath that, he's using grabs, quick grabs of all of the chords that are going on underneath. So the chords that he's using is F minor 7, and he's using a voicing down here that has got an F, a C, and an E flat there. So, and it's fairly quick, so it's like that. So it's kind of staccato. And then he's using a voicing of B flat minor 7 here. So he's got an E flat, an A flat, and a D flat. E flat obviously isn't one of the chord tones on there, but it still works underneath that chord. So, and then he uses a shell voicing of an E flat 7. So E flat, G, and D flat there. The tonic, major third, and the flat 7. And then he uses a shell voicing of an A flat major 7 as well. So So he's got E flat, G, and C there as well. So he's, for the first 4 bars, he's using the chords that are there. So, and he's using some rhythmic displacement. I don't want to go too deeply into this, but essentially across the top, that pedal tone, each time he hits it, he's holding it for 3 beats each time. And so obviously the bar that's underneath is in 4/4, so that clashes and you get a 4 against 3 feel, which displaces the time. So it actually makes you feel like you're kind of in 3/4 for a bit. And obviously this is a great rhythmic tension device, which he'll then resolve later on in bar 7. So over the next 4 bars, we've got D flat major 7, D minor 7, G7 flat 13, and then C major 7. Just before he hits the D flat major 7, he converts that A flat major 7 into a dominant chord. So he creates a secondary dominant. And then does the same thing with the D flat major 7, makes it into a D flat 9. And then after that, going to the D minor 7, G7 flat 13, he actually ignores the D minor 7 altogether and just plays a G13 sound over the top of it, and then moves on to this C major 7, which he approaches by playing the major 7, the major 3rd, and then a 9th on there. So this is a really nice kind of open sounding. So the whole passage here, the 8-bar passage, F minor 7, B flat minor 7, E flat 7, A flat major 7, and then A flat 7, and then D flat 7 there, or D flat 9, and then the over the D minor 7, G7 flat 13, he's playing that G13 over the top of it, and then back to C major 7, but he's treating it as a C major 9. So when you're soloing with chords, using a pedal tone is one approach that you can use, that Jim uses here. So here's an exercise, which is a slightly basic one, which shows you how to use a pedal tone. So I've hit the pedal tone and then I've played a chord. Now if you notice, I'm only using chords that are in the vicinity of that pedal tone. Okay, so I'm not always playing the whole of the chord. Sometimes I'm only playing 2 notes, maybe the 3rd and the 7th from each chord. So that's an approach that you can use. Don't feel like you have to play all 4 notes from a 7th chord, or all 6 strings or all 5 strings. You can just use 2 to outline the harmony. So here it is. Okay, let's take a look at the next 8 bars. So again, if you want to unpack the harmony, it's in the previous lesson. So go and take a look at that if you want to get an understanding of the harmony that's going on underneath. So Jim is using a pedal tone again here. So you can use the same technique in your solos. The one thing that he's doing here is he's not actually following the proper harmony underneath. Now the way that he approaches this is with something which is called a chromatic descent. That's just a big long fancy word for essentially starting in one place, trying to get to another place and going down in step, basically. Jim obviously doesn't use every single step. He starts up here, and this is over the top of the C minor 7. So what he's playing there is kind of like an E flat over F chord. So the E flat triad with an F in the bass, but it works over the top of your C minor 7. It kind of creates a C minor 11 kind of sound. So that's perfectly fine what he's using there. That fits in. Now, while underneath the harmony is F minor 7, what he actually plays underneath is a kind of Lydian dominant kind of type chord, an E flat Lydian dominant chord, so E flat 7 sharp 11. He's keeping that pedal tone in the top though, that G in the top, okay, over the top of it, and then he just moves that down chromatically, so down to D 7 sharp 11, and then D flat 7 sharp 11, heading for this chord here. Now the chord that Jim's heading for here is an A flat major 9 over C, which is perfectly fine. The harmony underneath is A flat major 7. But he's obviously descended chromatically, starting perfectly fine on C minor 7, but then whilst the F minor 7's going on, he's got an E flat Lydian dominant, E flat 7 sharp 11, and then over the top of the B flat 7, he's got like a D flat 7 sharp 11 idea there as well. And then a D over the top of the E flat major 7. He's got a D flat 7 sharp 11, and then heading for that A major 9 over C, and then obviously moves it down to G major 7 there, which is the voicing that he's using there is a G major 9 over B. That's a really cool chord. Pat Metheny uses that chord, I believe, over the top of the way up. How do we go about using that in our solos? Here's a little exercise using a 6-2-5-1, so B minor 7, E7, A minor 7, D7, going to G major 7. But I've approached it going chromatically, so I've basically kept the pedal tone in the top, that F sharp in the top, and then I've created chords underneath it that move all the way to a G major 7 underneath it. Now the chord names underneath it will look fairly wacky, but just remember that all I'm doing is keeping that pedal tone in the top, which keeps your ear and makes it all make sense, and then I'm just creating tense sounding chords which will then eventually resolve. Obviously you could see it as I'm tritone subbing all the way down. But I'm not always thinking like that when I'm doing chromatic descents. Essentially, I'm thinking more about keeping that pedal tone on top, and it doesn't really matter what chords I'm playing underneath as long as I maintain that chromatic descent. Okay, let's take a look at the next 8 bars, the B section. Okay, so Jim uses that open sounding A minor 7 voicing that he used from the intro. Really, really cool. And then there's just some simple lines using the flat 9 over the top of the D there, and then just a nice little G major 7 line. Again, he's ignoring that F sharp half diminished chord. He's just using B7 vocabulary. Really, really cool minor 13 chord there, I love that. And then at the top here, this is a really interesting voicing. Now it's a voicing that's built on 2/4, 4th, 4th, and then a major 3rd at the top. Now, I think this is really, really cool. This just shows that he's using a chord and then looking for notes either side. Okay, now this is something that you can do. This is an approach that you can use if you're just getting started with soloing with chords. It's basically to find your voicings, the chord voicings that you're going to use, and then look for notes either side that fit in with the scale. So here are some voicings that I've created off the back of that. Essentially, all I've done is I've just gone up in the scale using the same structure, so 4th, 4th, and major 3rd, keeping it diatonic, so it's all notes within the scale. So I've got all of my chords there, and then there's a little exercise afterwards, which is a 2-5-1 in E major, which basically uses some of those voicings and then just uses notes that are in the vicinity. So nothing wildly out there, no jumping up and down the fretboard. It's all notes that are either side. And this is something that you can use in your own playing. Okay, let's take a look at the last 12 bars. Here they are. Okay, a lot going on in these last 12 bars. So opens up using a similar idea to what we saw Jim using in the last video, where basically he's taking an idea and extrapolating that out, using the idea as much as possible, and he actually manages to make that last over the top of about 6 bars, so a bar from the B section at the end there. So that's the idea, and then he just slightly changes it. Okay, using the same notes but just rhythmically changing it, kind of starting it on a different beat in the bar, which is a really cool device to use. And then this line here, rather tricky line. Now, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what he's thinking there, but it kind of seems like he's using the Phrygian dominant there, but I don't want to go too deeply into that here. But essentially it's dominant language that he's using. He's created more of a dominant approach over the top of that A flat major chord. So again, like I've said, he doesn't seem to have approached that A flat major chord in the major tonality. He seems to kind of make it into a secondary dominant chord, and he's doing the same with the D flat here as well, the D flat major 7, making it into a dominant chord. So there's just some simple lines there, and then after that he's using more of a chordal approach. So over the top of the D flat minor 6, he's just using the upper structure of the chord, okay, starting on the second beat, and then does a similar thing over the top of the C minor 7, but using a ninth note on the top, making it C minor 9, starting on the second beat again, continuing the idea. And then a similar idea, this is a really cool idea that he uses. Instead of playing the B diminished 7th, he actually just moves down a semitone, because obviously he's aiming for a B flat minor 7. He just moves down a semitone from C minor 7 to B minor 7. So here, okay, obviously adding in that E there, but it just makes a B minor 11-y kind of sound. So, and then he's adding the E in the top as well there, which is cool. Okay, and then after that, approaching it more in fourths. Now, fourths are a really good approach to use when soloing with chords. It sounds fairly modern. Here is an example of all of the chords that are in fourths, the shapes, which I've used the key of E here. So all of the shapes for fourths. Why not take some of these shapes, convert them into the other key, and then use them in your own playing? Once you've learnt those shapes there for the fourths, obviously they work in any key, just move them around. Here's an example of me using those fourth shapes in a solo over the top of 2-5-1 in A flat. Now the chord that I used on the dominant there at the end, this chord at the top, okay, Jim uses this right at the end here. This is quite a tricky little section here. Now the way that I'm fingering this is I've got my first finger on the 5th string on the 10th fret, and then I've got my second finger barring across the 11th fret. My pinky is on the 12th fret on the 2nd string. Okay, it might take a little bit of time just to kind of get comfortable with that. And he uses this right for the last 4 bars and approaches it again going down chromatically towards the F minor. So he starts off with the E flat 7, sharp 9, flat 13, and then plays an A flat major 9 chord shape there, and then basically takes that idea with the 7 sharp 9 flat 13 idea in D first, and then goes down chromatically, D flat, C, which obviously he's seeing as a dominant chord 5, and then going to an F minor 11 kind of sound. I've voiced it like that to get the A flat in underneath there. That's a couple of approaches that you can use for soloing in chords. So you can use the conventional chord shapes with a pedal tone over the top. Then you could use a chromatically descending approach with the with or without actually a pedal tone over the top of it. Then you could use some stacked ideas using 2 stacked fourths and a major third, and then take that all the way through diatonically through your scale, and then solo with it using notes either side if you're just starting out of the chords. And then the final approach we looked at there was stacked fourths. So there's 4 approaches there that you could use for soloing in chords over the top of this standard or any other jazz tune. So try some of those in your own playing. Take a look at the examples. Remember, you can get them over on Patreon. Here is the link here where you can get the full transcription, all of the exercises on the backing track, and some extras too. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next week as we take a look at what he does over the trading that he does with the drummer on this record. So happy practicing, and I'll see you next week.